Over the years, investing in real estate has probably made more people wealthy than any other asset class combined. Owning and investing in real estate is one of the surefire ways to become financially independent. But owning real estate can be difficult for a lot of people because it has a very high barrier of entry. You need a ridiculously large down payment, you gotta have a good credit score, you gotta get approved for a loan from the bank, you gotta get an appraisal and an inspection, and there's just a lot of moving parts to buying real estate. But what if there was a way that we could get rid of literally every single one of those negative items and just simply jump straight to the good stuff of buying real estate? Hi everyone, my name is Ben, and this channel is dedicated to all things personal finance, helping you earn more, spend less, and invest the difference. Now this method is not exactly a secret method. The technique itself has been around for pretty much ever, but very few people know about it. And even the people that know about it, very few people have actually bought a property this way. But for a real estate investor, this can be a fantastic way to get in the game and start investing. Because with this method, you're not going to need a down payment. It doesn't matter what your credit score is. You don't need an appraisal. You can just skip straight to the good stuff of looking for properties to buy. Now, I will throw out this one word of caution, and that is that this is typically going to be for investors. It's a little bit harder to do this for a property that you plan on occupying yourself as a home. And the reason being is you need to actively go out and look for these properties that you can buy using this method. It's not like you can go on Zillow or Trulia or the MLS or something like that and you see all these different properties for sale and you're like, that one, I want to buy that one. You got to go out and actively look for these guys. You're going to need to look for motivated sellers. So in order to understand this technique, we first have to understand how a traditional sale works. Let's say that you already own a house, you bought it a few years ago, and I am now trying to buy it from you. Now, more than likely, when you bought that house a couple of years ago, you didn't have the money to go out and buy the house outright. So you went and you got a loan from your bank. In some states, they call that a mortgage. In other states, they call it a deed of trust. But one way or the other, you got a loan from the bank. Now, fast forward a few years later, and I am now trying to buy that house from you. Now, typically what I would do is I would go to my own bank and I would get a loan. And my loan would pay off your existing loan. And then anything that's left over after you've paid off your loan is profit for you. But why does it have to be that way? Why does there have to be two loans? Why does my loan have to pay off your loan? Look, there's already a loan in place. What if I just used your loan to buy this house? And that's what purchasing a house subject to the existing financing is all about. We're not changing the financing. I'm using your financing that's already in place to take control of that property. Now this is going to be a little bit different than assumption or assuming a loan. And that's one way to do it, is to try to assume the loan, in which case I need to go and talk to your banker and basically get approved to take over your loan. Now in that case, they would take your name off of that loan and they would put my name on that loan, but I still have to qualify for the loan in the first place, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. So instead of assuming the loan, I'm just simply going to make payments on your behalf instead and just continue paying down that mortgage as if nothing had ever happened. So the easiest way to think about it is you are going to deed the property over to me, and in return, at the first of every month when that mortgage statement comes due, I'm going to be the one to actually send the check to Chase or Wells Fargo or whatever bank instead of you. So for example, if you had previously owned the house for 3 years and the mortgage payment was $1,000 a month, then when I take over that mortgage, I'm going to be paying your bank for the next 27 years. If it was a 30-year mortgage, I'm going to be paying $1,000 to your bank on your behalf for the next 27 years, after which case that loan goes away and I own the property outright. Now, since I'm making the monthly payments to your loan and I did not need to go and get a loan of myself, that means I don't need a credit check. I don't need an appraisal. I don't even technically need a home inspection, although I would highly recommend that you get one just so that you know what you're buying, but technically it's not necessary. The only thing that's necessary in this whole process is finding a seller that is willing to sell you their house using this method. Now, why do I say that you have to find somebody willing to do it using this method? Well, there are some pros and cons like everything else in life. For you as the purchaser of the property, it's very beneficial to you because like I said, you didn't need to go out and get a loan. You didn't need a credit check. You don't need an appraisal. You don't need a home inspection. And typically you're going to get really good interest rates doing this because when this other person bought the house, they bought it to live in it themselves. And people that are buying a house to live in it themselves get lower interest rates than investors who are trying to buy the property for an investment property to rent it out. Usually investors pay about 0.5% higher interest than somebody that was buying it to live in it. And that can be the difference of hundreds of dollars a month. So it's very beneficial to the buyer in order to do this because you basically don't need any resources. You can just simply take control of the property from day one. From the seller's perspective, it's a little bit more difficult because they're essentially the ones taking the risk. Because they no longer own the house, they gave the house to you, but they are still ultimately responsible for the debt on that house. Because remember, the loan is still in their name. Which means that if they sell the house to me, then in theory, I make the payments on that house. But what if, for whatever reason, I fail to make the payments like I promised I would? The bank isn't going to come after me because my name isn't on the loan. The bank is actually going to come after this person that just sold me the house. It's going to affect their credit score, not mine. And that's why if you do decide to utilize this method in order to purchase real estate, you better be darn sure that you can make the payments like you promised, because you're screwing over somebody that thought they were selling their house and now all of a sudden their credit score is tanking simply because you weren't being honest and you didn't make payments like you told them you were going to. Now, yes, in theory, if you don't make payments, that seller can foreclose on you and take back the house, and now the house becomes theirs again. But in the meantime, they still have monthly payments due every month to the bank. So while they're in the process of foreclosing on you and taking back their property, they still have to come up with a way to pay the bank, or else their credit score is going to suffer. So they do have a little bit of protections, but honestly, not a whole lot, because in the short term, their credit score is going to suffer. So please, please, please make sure that you have money on hand that you can actually pay these things on time like you said you were going to. And that's why you have to find motivated sellers that are willing to actually sell you their house using this method. Now, why might somebody actually take the risk and sell you the property knowing that their credit score is the one that could potentially suffer? Well, there's a couple of different options, and usually it involves them needing to sell the house and selling it rapidly. For example, maybe they're in some financial trouble themselves and they're going through the pre-foreclosure process, like they're already about to lose their house. They got to get rid of this thing as fast as possible. In that case, you might be actually helping them out by taking this property off of their hand. And if they're in pre-foreclosure, their credit score is already probably pretty well trashed to begin with. And in fact, if you make these monthly payments on time like you said you were going to, then for the lifetime of that loan, those on-time payments actually get reported to their credit score. So it's actually going to help their credit score as you make these payments. Or maybe the seller is recently divorced and they need to close quickly on this house so they can split the assets, or maybe the house belonged to a relative, maybe grandma or grandpa, and they've now passed away. And so this house really isn't serving any purpose because it's sitting empty, and in fact it's more of a liability than anything because they still have to pay taxes and insurance and all that kind of stuff on this house that's just sitting empty. So you got to go out and find somebody that's willing to actively get rid of their property quickly, and then go and talk to them directly. You don't want any agents involved, no real estate agents or anything like that. You need to be able to speak directly to the sellers. Now, as far as paperwork goes, you're going to want an attorney. You're going to want somebody there at closing to go over all of the different documents. So you're going to have a real estate attorney draft up all of the legal documents to actually make this exchange work. So it's completely legit, it's completely on board. Just go find a local real estate attorney in your area and they can facilitate the actual transfer of this property and make sure everything is done correctly. Now, one thing that I feel I should mention when buying a property subject to the existing loan is in every conventional mortgage, there's a clause in there. It's known as the due on sale clause. And essentially what it says is if the person that got this loan, if they ever decide to sell this property, the bank has the option to demand payment in full. Now, notice I said the option to. They don't have to demand payment due in full, but they have the right to demand immediate repayment of that entire loan. And it kind of makes sense because that house was the collateral for that mortgage. So if the person no longer owns the house, then they don't really have the collateral for that loan. And so the bank can demand repayment of that loan in full. But are they going to? But realistically, banks don't want the money back immediately. Because if they get the money back immediately, then they don't collect any interest on it anymore. They want this loan to be drawn out as long as possible so they can just start collecting interest every single month from those mortgage payments. So generally speaking, as long as you're paying those mortgage payments like you were supposed to, and the bank is getting a check every month like they were supposed to, then they're happy, and more than likely 99.9% of the time they're not going to even blink. But technically that is an option, so you need to account for it. So you got to have some sort of plan B in place just in case the bank does want their money all at once. If you found this video useful, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment down below, give it a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and as always, I'll see you all again next time.